Well, welcome out there once again to my program. Always a pleasure to be here. Always a pleasure to have you out there. I have a guest that's been on a number of times before. Always a pleasure to have him as my guest and on the show. Very distinguished gentleman who has risen from, well, to be a representative, and that's not an easy task, and it's not an easy task to do on a daily basis, especially when you live here in the Fall River area and you got to travel to Boston on a fairly regular basis. That's a trek that a lot of people don't even like to do for pleasure, never mind business. He has a local farm out in Westport, and we're going to talk about farming. So Representative Paul Schmid, welcome once again to
Richard.
the program.
Well, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here with you. And it's a heck of an honor to represent the 8th Bristol District. Really is.
And I don't hold it against you that you're a Marine, and I went in the Army.
We can work together. We always have.
The Marines and the Army, they did a lot of work for this country over the years, and they'll continue to do it. But farming. Now, are you considered a farmer by trade, occupation?
Well, I think that I think my primary job is being a state representative.
But prior to that, were you?
Prior to that, I was in business for many years, but my family has operated a farm in Westport, River Rock Farm.
River Rock
Farm.
Where is that farm?
Well, that's down Horseneck Road.
Okay.
And if you go down past the Buzzards Bay Brewery, and you keep going, if anybody has ever gone to the Sylvan Nursery to buy any nursery products, we're basically right across the street from them. We've got a big long dairy barn, which we don't use anymore for dairy cattle, but a big long dairy barn and a silo. That's us.
Can we see the cows roaming around in the fields?
You will see cows in the fields. The cows that you'll see from Horseneck Road are actually not ours.
All right.
They belong, we lease that part of the farm out to another farmer. Our cows are through the woods, a little bit closer to the river.
Now, days like we've had in the last week or so, very cold, dry, cows tend to stay indoors, or do they get out there?
You know, cattle like being outside, and they don't like being cooped up together. So unless it's really cold, they like to be outside underneath a tree, anywhere that they can get out of the wind.
I see.
It's the wind that really bothers them.
Now, farming in the state of Massachusetts, let me ask you this, as a representative, what agency, what department does farms fall under? Because they are regulated in a sense. What department?
So we have the Department of Agricultural Resources.
All right.
The Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources. A very fine commissioner, by the way, right now, John LeBeau, who himself has a farming background, and he oversees all the various parts of agriculture for Massachusetts, including things like farmers markets.
Oh, yeah. Now, I would imagine that over the years, a lot of years, farming in Massachusetts has declined. More of more people, more industry. Is that correct?
Well, it is true, Richard, that compared to, say, 50 years ago, there's a lot fewer farms. But if you look back in the last 10 years, we've actually seen a growth
In farms.
in farms.
Now, to be considered a farm, is there a requirement of a number of acres?
We have a method of assessing farmland
In Massachusetts?
in Massachusetts. And that says that if you have a minimum of 5 acres and at least $500 in agricultural revenue, then that property that's being farmed can be assessed for its agriculture value.
Tax-wise?
For property taxes. For property taxes basis, it can be assessed as
Which is a lower
farm
amount?
value. Well, it's a lower amount,
Is
that's
it
right.
lower than residential?
Yes, sure.
So I imagine the purpose is to encourage farms to be in operation?
Well, it's a great program because one of the reasons agriculture is growing right now in Massachusetts is that farmers have a market right next to them. We have so many people
Oh, yeah.
in Boston, New Bedford, Fall River, but that makes the land more expensive. So it's so important that farmers pay property taxes based on what it's worth in farming. Now, if it comes out of farming, then all bets are off and it
Yeah,
goes back to the normal residential
It's
value.
subdivided for houses,
Right.
then back on the rolls as residential in the town or city, wherever it's in.
Right.
Now, what it seems to be, we might say, the biggest or the most agricultural product produced in Massachusetts? I know it's not cotton, probably not wheat, but
Our biggest commodities in Massachusetts are cranberries.
cranberries. Oh, okay. So, but you have to have 5 acres? Considered?
To be assessed for property taxes, yes,
Okay.
you do. Yep.
But you can still have cranberry bogs even though you have less than 5 acres.
Oh,
of course.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So cranberries is...
Cranberries is our number 1, and dairy is
Dairy?
number 2.
All right. Dairy
Yeah.
products,
And then,
cheese, things of that nature.
that's right, and more you're seeing farmers not just milking their cows, but taking the milk and making a product out of it, like a cheese. Or a yogurt or ice cream.
Ice cream. Oh, everybody likes ice cream.
Even today,
Is that a big product of cow milk in Massachusetts?
even today in January, Richard, we like ice cream. That's
Oh.
right, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So cranberries, dairy products, and then third are vegetables.
Okay. What you might what type of vegetables?
Well, by that I mean
Squash.
just a mixture of vegetables that are often sold at a roadside stand or at one of our many farmers markets.
Apples, squash, winter in season, blueberries, strawberries.
There you go. All of the above.
Yeah.
What's the first one that comes out in the spring? I think generally, at least in our garden at home, asparagus is the first thing we
Asparagus.
find.
Oh, everybody loves that
And,
today.
and peas.
Peas.
And then you go on through beans and carrots and
Lettuce,
beets and lettuce, kale.
Now, do you find, in your experience, that there is more growth than there was ever before in greenhouses?
Yes, greenhouses are very useful for farmers to extend their season in the fall and to get started earlier in the spring.
You know, I was watching a little clip on TV, and these farmers in merry old England, in London, were growing their products underground in old tunnels. I don't know what the tunnels were used for, but what they're doing now is they're growing a product. And they have lights, you know, that substitute for the sun, and of course water. And there, people up above are walking along, and down below 30 or 40 feet, they're growing lettuce, etc.
Sure. So if you go over to the UMass Dartmouth campus,
All right.
and you look around, you'll see a couple of containers, shipping containers. And inside those containers, they're growing the lettuce that is served
At the cafeteria?
at UMass Dartmouth. And it's just as you've described. They have lights, and they have water, and a little bit of fertilizer, and they're growing the lettuce in these in these trays of water.
Now, well, I guess it's apparently it's cost productive in a sense because the growers in England are making some sort of a profit from this.
Yeah.
Now, if someone were to, you have a lot of farming experience, so you have a lot of knowledge. If someone's sitting out there, you know, and you have these people, well, there are some executives, you know, there's been some news articles, they've decided that they're high-paying, full of tension, not too gratifying jobs, not what they want to do anymore, so they're going off and buying a farm. What does a person need to know before they start to get involved in farming? Beside the plan, you know, beside buying the land, but the daily routine. It's not 9 to 5.
Oh, you're so right about that, Richard.
What is your advice?
My advice is to be prepared to work darn hard, because it's not easy. And I take my hat off to all farmers in this area who are making a living that way. It's not easy, but it sure is gratifying. Yeah.
Good, healthy, hard work.
Nothing wrong with that. My father always used to say, hard work never killed anybody. So.
No. Now, a good farm, would you suggest should have like a variety of things? Not only growing crops, but maybe some sheep, some chickens, rabbits. What do you believe that makes a rounded farm? I mean, maybe some animals you say, well, they're a lot of work, not much, out of it to have them. But what do you think is a nice rounded farm? You got 5 acres. Someone out there says, I got 5 acres. I think I'm going to start a farm. What should I start off, or what should I have on those 5 acres?
Well, you know, on 5 acres, you can grow a lot of vegetables. And that's something we're seeing in Westport. We're seeing fields here and there that were unused. They're being put back into agriculture. By the way, primarily by younger people. We see a lot of young people coming into agriculture because they want to spend their day doing something they really believe in. And a little acre field here or a 2-acre field there, you can grow a lot of vegetables. And that's often the way it's done. Buying land in this area is getting pretty darned expensive. But you can find someone who own some property,
Rent?
who rent that land from them, they'll probably be very glad to receive a little bit of income from it and to see it being used.
Well,
Yeah.
you know, the rent would probably pay for the taxes on that land, and they don't have to have, you know, a nasty neighbor next to them if they sold it.
That's right, and they, the property owner would also know that there's somebody on their property taking care of it, watching, and so on.
Now, are they still entitled, the owner of the property, still entitled, if they have 5 acres, to the tax break?
If they are receiving at least $500 in rent from from a farmer, then it does qualify to be assessed for its farm value.
Now, besides the vegetables, what about animals? Chickens always a good thing to have around, eat up the bugs.
Well, I'll give you what we do on our farm. Our principal animal is cattle, beef cattle, and we've been raising Black Angus for, I think my dad bought the first part of the herd about 55 years ago.
Now, how many do you have?
So we have about 40 animals right now, and that's our principal business. They're grass-fed, organic certified, and we sell the meat direct to the consumer.
All right, direct to the consumer.
Yes.
So that means if someone pulls over in an SUV and,
Yes and no, Richard.
all right,
Most of our, we like to have, the minimum order is a half of a side of beef, which is about 100 pounds. And in that 100 pounds, you get about a third hamburger, a third steaks,
And who's doing
and
the
a third
preparation?
roasts. So there are 2 USDA-approved slaughterhouses in Massachusetts right now. Both of them are a long truck ride away.
yeah.
But the good news is that a slaughterhouse will be opening in Westport this spring.
So there's that many animals in the area that warrants having a slaughterhouse.
Well, that's what the investors
Yeah.
in this
Now, what
slaughterhouse
would they
believe.
Cattle would be part of it, sheep?
They think that their primary business is going to
Hogs?
come from cattle, from beef cattle, but they're prepared to process hogs, sheep, goat, and
Hogs, yeah.
we're very excited about this. It's going to be on Route 6 in Westport, just east of Mid-City Steel.
All right, just east of Mid-City Steel.
And they're going to have a retail store. So you'll be able to go and
Buy fresh meat?
buy fresh, local meat.
Well, I think that will be a great incentive for, you know, people who have just a little land to have a couple of hogs running around.
Absolutely, and be able to have them slaughtered locally.
So they actually, they could have the hog or 2 slaughtered locally and buy the meat. In other words, say, I want this meat from this hog.
Yes, you'll.
You slaughter it, and I'll pay you for it, and package it, and I'm taking it home.
I'm taking it back and putting it in my freezer. So we're pretty excited about that. That'll be opening a little later this spring in Westport on Route 6, and I would ask people just to keep their eye out. I'm sure the opening will be well publicized.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure, you know, in a traditional farming community as it was before, maybe not so much now, Westport, that word will spread pretty quickly.
Oh, I think so. You know, every community used to have at least one slaughterhouse.
I think Somerset or Swansea might have had one. You could almost see it.
Yes, Baker.
Is he still there?
They were out of business, and then somebody told me a while ago they were back in business. Perhaps some of your viewers have more up-to-date information.
Yeah, I knew someone who lived in Tiverton that had a huge, huge freezer, and that's how you know, he would fill the freezer by putting an order in somewhere.
And they tell me that going back to World War II, again in Westport, off of Route 6, about where Mid-City Scrap is now, that there was a large processing plant there. And in Dartmouth, there was one on Chase Road. So it's great to see this happening.
What about horse? Is that, I mean, people have eaten horse, there's no doubt about that. Do you know if that still goes on in Massachusetts, where horses could be slaughtered and the meat sold? Horse meat?
So I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think we eat horse meat in this country. They do in Europe.
Well, we used to.
But I think tastes have changed a little now, so I can't advise buying a horse to make.
All right, that's answers the question. Probably not. So you're not going to find horse meat on a shelf in your supermarket in Massachusetts. All right, so that's an interesting. How about? Do you know of any big farms around that actually grow a lot of a product, and a product is shipped somewhere else? Are there any silos left in Westport?
Sure, there's wow, I can think of about a half a dozen silos offhand. They're not used. Farmers don't use a silo anymore. They don't store the corn in a silo. They store it on the ground.
On the ground?
Yep, on the ground. And they'll put a big tarp over it.
It doesn't rot?
The surface will rot the first couple of inches, but underneath it's all good. So all those wonderful silos that we see around the landscape are really just there because they used to be used.
Look nice.
That's right.
Too expensive to take down.
That's right. But you know, there's a number of farmers in Westport. The Santos brothers on Main Road milk about 70 cows and make their own cheese.
Yeah.
You can find their cheese in the stores. And
now, the cheese has to be inspected, the process?
Sure.
Is that U.S. Department of Agriculture or Massachusetts?
You know, it depends on the product. It's either the FDA or the Massachusetts Ag Department. But either way, our food safety in this country is right up at the top. You can be very confident that what you eat has been inspected.
You know, cheese, most people like cheese. Of course, milk is a big product. So you have the cattle, the hogs, turkey, raising turkeys. We used to have one in Tiverton, I'm not too sure. Helgers.
Yeah, so far as I know, Helgers is still in business raising turkeys. I understand that it's tricky, that turkeys are pretty susceptible to disease.
Yeah.
So you've got to know what you're doing. But
and chickens, I imagine, there that you'd be careful. But still an animal that's raised locally, and of course Thanksgiving and throughout the year.
Sure.
Chicken, we have.
There's a number of places in Westport, for instance, where you can buy fresh, farm-raised, locally raised chicken.
Do you know of any place where the chicken is raised and then prepared, and then they have maybe a little store right next to the farm that where you can buy the chicken, or does it end up in, you know, in a market?
No, I think you definitely can buy chicken off from the farm. And there's Weatherlow Farm on Sodom Road in Westport, for instance. And then there is a farm on American Legion Highway. I would advise your viewers to Google that. And I know they're going to find some locally raised chicken.
Now, once again, for the viewer who's interested in going into farming, what do you think is the first stop to get some basic information, rules and regulations to know you just can't be out there doing what you want willy-nilly?
Sure.
There's, you know, there's the sanitary, hygiene issues, there's the regulations, et cetera.
Sure. Well, I suppose the first thing to do would be to talk to a farmer. I think
Call Paul Schmid.
you'll find,
Call Paul Schmid,
for example.
Representative.
Sure.
You could at least direct them to the Agricultural Resources Commission or department.
Talk to a local farmer. Google MDAR, Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources. Some very helpful local field agents who have a lot of information and are very willing to help.
Now, there's a farm in Tiverton, trees. The lady said she has, it was on TV, there was a little documentary, 4,000 trees. Started off at 1,000. Tree farm. That's interesting and, well, not you might say a typical farm with the cattle and the chickens, etc., but considered a farm. How about fisheries? Is that considered farming if you have a fishery? So in a Westport area, someone, and that we go down to the end. Part of farming, though, fish farming.
Well, it certainly is related to farming, and there are a number of shellfish farms on our rivers. For instance, in Westport, people growing oysters, and that's a growing part of what do they call it? They call it aquaculture. Aquaculture.
Well, Representative Paul Schmid, it was a pleasure. I learned a lot. If I ever go into farming, I'm going to give you the full credit. Thank you for being on my program, and I advise anyone out there who's interested in starting a farm to check the background, get yourself a business plan, check with the Chamber of Commerce. They'll help you with a business plan. You'll need to make some investment, etc. So thank you out there for watching, and I'll see you next time. Well, I guess we're going to go a little over. Well, that's it anyway, Paul.
Gosh, time goes quickly.
Yeah, half hour.
I had wanted to put in a pitch for all the winter CSAs that are available. We're still buying vegetable